Good morning. I will be addressing employee duties of loyalty and confidentiality today, and how the retention of the highly sensitive information iLearn has in development is connected to shoring up potential breaches of confidentiality through employee conduct during and after employment. Educating your employees as to what information is considered confidential and what activities can breach their duties to the company is vital. Let's look first at protecting the property of iLearn. The software you have in development is intellectual property. Policies need to be introduced where any software which is created by staff in the workplace remains the property of iLearn. Automatic copyright of work-produced content as iLearn's property is not guaranteed through the Copyright Act or the Designs Act. I recommend a requirement safeguarding this be incorporated in a workplace instrument. Moving on to the issue of employee confidentiality. First, we consider what is expressly prohibited for current employees. No employee can be allowed to run a rival business or assist a competitor in order to secure employment. Additionally, if an employee wants to leave, that employee then can't do anything which would undermine iLearn's business capacity. What this effectively means is an employee preparing to leave cannot solicit the clientele of iLearn to entice them to a rival software company. They also can't poach current staff still at iLearn. Most importantly though, deliberate copying, removal or memorization of any valuable iLearn information by an employee preparing to leave is expressly forbidden. A potential tool in ensuring staff stay close to iLearn secrets is to establish an exclusive service commitment. Employees are asked to provide their services on a contract with a proviso forbidding working for others. It does operate only during employment though, and will not cover any issue post-employment. What about ex-employees then? Post-employment, a duty of confidentiality still exists. An iLearn ex-employee remains bound not to use or disclose information obtained during employment, which is then used for their advantage or to the company's detriment. However, the inclusion of restrictive covenants prohibiting post-employment use of highly specific software development secrets can also be used at iLearn. If they are construed to be broad in scope, an employee will have a good idea of the what and the where which is prohibited to them. The covenant, most readily accepted by the courts, imposes an agreement to refrain from competing with the employer for a defined period post-employment, as well as agreeing not to solicit clients. Keep in mind, an agreement of this type can be included in new employment contracts or as a separate instrument for new employees. With staff already employed, however, any restrictive covenant must be agreed to with consideration given by iLearn in exchange for agreeing to the contract. A provision of this kind is still essentially a restraint of trade though. In its composition, iLearn must take care to show the restraint is to protect a legitimate interest and that the scope of it only covers that interest and the risks posed to the business. So what is confidential information? As a general rule, an iLearn employee has an obligation not to use or disclose without consent any information they reasonably understand to be confidential. However, confidential information can be a very broad and indistinct umbrella term. So iLearn needs to take care that they specify exactly what you consider to be confidential information and then be shown to be taking steps to keep that information secret. Valuable trade secrets can only be protected if an employee has done enough to demonstrate the confidential information was sufficiently secret to retract that duty of confidentiality. iLearn must take steps to identify and then prevent information flagged as confidential from being circulated both in and outside of the workplace. The duration of a restraint must also be reasonable. In an industry such as education software development, a time frame of between 3 to 6 months would be reasonable. Although a best case draft of time restrictions would have cascading restrictive provisions. So a covenant could allow for a time frame of between 3 and 12 months. If a clause for the longer term is challenged, it can then be severed without voiding the entire contract and dropping down to the next one. So to go from 12 to 6 to 3, whatever is considered reasonable at the time. Remedial action is the topic we will look at briefly next. If it does come down to remedial action, several options are available to iLearn. Interim injunctions can be pursued to restrain a breach of confidence or to enforce post-employment covenants. Compensation for loss caused by a breach of confidentiality or fidelity is also an option where the information has been used to iLearn's detriment. Lastly, an account for any profits made as a result of confidential information being used or disclosed can also be considered. Finally, we have issues of employee loyalty. I have intentionally left this topic until last. Every employee has an implied duty to serve their employer faithfully. This duty of fidelity continues for as long as your employees are employed by your company. But let us be frank in discussing this. The best way to ensure employee loyalty is for you as employees to create a socially healthy environment for your employees. I can go on about the legal requirements, which can be written 1,000 different ways in as many instruments to discourage disloyal behaviour affecting the development and sales of this company. But if you have open and encouraging dialogue with staff, transparent processes in place, and you actively create a place of work where your staff are confident in your ability to manage them, then that is the best possible preventative method you can employ in your company. Thank you for your time in attending today's presentation. Hopefully, I have given you much to think on and offered some practical solutions addressing some of the issue iLearn faces. Thank you.